Okay, hello. Welcome to our next episode of the River Volta Podcast. My name is Delane Just, and I have Callum here co-hosting with me today. And so today we are interviewing Bernadette Wagner. So Bernadette grew up on a small family farm just outside of Regina, Saskatchewan, and she embodies the spirit of Canadians' prairies within her work. Ranging from the sweet, gentle summer breeze to the howling winter winds, prairie life steals and tempers character. And Bernadette's love of the land and her compassion is instilled within her poetry. Bernadette served on the boards of several organizations, including the Saskatchewan Writers Guild and the Sage Hill Writing Experience, and as the chair of the Cathedral Village Arts Festival. She was the inaugural writer in residence at the Last Mountain Lake Cultural Center and edited A Gift of the Prairie, a collection of writings arising from the southern shore of Last Mountain Lake. She's also been featured in journals, anthologies, newspapers, and magazines, on radio and television, film, and on the web, in schools, on stages, and the streets of Regina. Bernadette writes in multiple genres. And when studying with former Vancouver Poet Laureate Rachel Rose in the Vancouver Manuscript Intensive, which allowed her to visit Japan and complete a first draft of a manuscript exploring uranium. I believe this work is also what Bernadette will be reading today. And an excerpt from this unpublished work of fiction netted her a Saskatchewan Writers Guild Short Manuscript Award for Children's Literature. And her collection of poetry, This Hot Place, was shortlisted for the Saskatchewan Book Award. Her second collection of poetry, The Dry Valley, was shortlisted for the Sask Book Award for Poetry, and an excerpt from her work on uranium tied as runner-up for the 2020 City of Regina Writing Award. Or it's this work on uranium that it will be read today. Is that correct, Bernadette?
Yes. The,
Awesome.
yeah, thank you.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the work that you're going to be reading today?
This is primarily from the Hiroshima section of the manuscript, and it's kind of my impressions of visiting Hiroshima, my research into the bombing of Hiroshima, the impact of it on the people of Hiroshima, and it leads then into the next section, which is about 3 Mile Island.
Oh, awesome.
So there are 5 sections in the manuscript, and each of the sections is a location where a uranium disaster has occurred.
Okay. And so this was inspired by your trip and time studying then in Japan with Rachel Rose?
Well, we went to Japan as a family to visit our daughter, and we visited Hiroshima. And I was just so moved. I was so deeply moved visiting the Peace Memorial Park and seeing the A-bomb dome and visiting the Peace Memorial Museum and the artifacts there, and then returning a year later to study it more deeply. That's when I was working with Rachel Rose through the Vancouver Manuscript Intensive and got the first draft finished-ish. Finished-ish, yeah.
They never feel
So
finished, those drafts.
yeah, that's for sure. I'm getting closer now to it feeling finished as a draft. Prepping to send it out eventually. I was to visit Chernobyl a year ago, April, as part of research for this manuscript, but of course the pandemic stopped that. So I'm hoping I can go in the spring, maybe. We'll see.
That's awesome. I was curious too about the uranium aspect of this manuscript. I also saw that you mentioned there was like Canadian and Saskatchewan uranium as part of the piece. I believe I saw that within the pieces that we'll be getting to later on.
Um, Saskatchewan uranium was not used in the making of the bomb. We weren't producing it then. We weren't mining it yet. We didn't start mining it until I believe it was the 50s when the early 50s maybe when it was started here. Um, but it was Canadian uranium that was used in the testing from Port Radium in around Lake Athabasca region there in the north, and it was shipped to Port Hope and then down to the States. And once it gets to the States, we don't know what happens to it after that. We do know that it is used in depleted uranium, which led then to my exploration of Iraq and my organizing around George Bush going into Iraq and my work in the peace movement as well. Um, I write about that in another section of it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I want to ask you a little bit more about activism and writing a little bit later on. But first, would you be able to talk about maybe what your, I guess, vision or goal for this manuscript is?
Well, I think part of it is self-expression, of course, a need for me to talk about my feelings around uranium, but to do so in a less political way, even though, I mean, that's not right to say that. No, it's not a less political way. It's a more in a literary way, I guess,
Yeah,
rather than,
yeah.
marching in the streets, which
I think
has
I know
been
what you
done.
mean. Yeah.
We've danced. I'm involved with a group that dances. We dance the Elm Dance in solidarity with the people around Chernobyl who are no longer able to go into their forest. And they were a forest people. So after the nuclear disaster there, um, that's, yeah. Ugh.
Okay. So is it kind of like,
Sorry, that wasn't very
oh
clear,
no,
but
I think I got what you mean. So do you kind of mean like with the way that art can kind of show these political statements in a way that simply stating it. Yeah,
yes, yes.
awesome.
Yeah, and it reaches a different audience too. And
Mhm.
it's a story that absolutely must be told. No one knows how far Canadian uranium goes. No one knows the
Yeah.
story. Like, so few know the stories.
Well, I was thinking too, that's why it popped up in my head because I was like, I didn't know that Canadian uranium was like involved in like or potentially like involved in these nuclear disasters as well. Like so um
Well, and Canadian scientists and Canadian workers were very much involved in collaborating on Little Boy. It
mm,
was a collaboration among Great Britain, Canada, and the USA.
I feel
So
like
yes, we were
people
involved. We were absolutely involved.
and we definitely overlook that. We always act like it's just the US.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
kind of something to keep us in check as Canadians as well with our own
yeah,
involvement.
yeah, for sure. And it
You,
was Tommy Douglas who started the uranium mining. So even New Democrats who are, more progressive
mhm,
on this issue, typically, um, nobody can nobody
yeah,
can claim innocence.
exactly. Calvin, do you have any other questions on this topic?
On this topic. I'm very interested in this uranium activism. So is it like the selling of uranium that you were opposed to, or is it just the application of uranium in like all the energy
I'm
sector?
I'm a little radical on that. I think it needs to stay in the ground. We do not have safe storage for uranium after it's through. It does not have a life cycle that ends in a short amount of time. We're talking a half-life of like so many years, so many years. And the nuclear waste that was stored after or around the time of the creation of that little boy bomb leaked just after I got back from Hiroshima
Oh my
the second
gosh.
time. Yeah, yeah. So
Oh,
it's not
the co-
safe. It is
yeah,
not safe. There's, and
the
it's got to be
coincidences
safe
too
for
there.
how many years? Like
Mhm.
hundreds and hundreds of years. I should know these facts off the top of my head, what the half-life is, but I haven't been working on this manuscript much, so I don't have them at my fingertips.
Oh no, that I think that still like just shows like holy cow, like right after you leave, like talk about like proving a hypothesis.
I was shocked. I was in tears. I was in tears, but I
Yeah,
was
I
shocked.
bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
faithful, very, very kinetic. Um, Sorry, I'm really gonna like take us off the rails here and ask about like, are there other isotopes that could be like used instead of uranium in nuclear power, or are you opposed completely to
Um, I
that?
haven't explored alternatives. That's not my mission. There are people doing that, and I'll leave it to them because they are much more educated. I'm just speaking to my research and what I've done over the past 5 years now,
And it's very strict.
refining this manuscript.
Yeah,
Um,
Very important work, I think,
yeah, no,
too.
it just has to stay in the ground until like we have to figure it like there have to be alternatives. We need to explore
Mm,
alternatives.
yeah. I think talk about also moving towards like solar powered things that are just better for the environment. Definitely like all of this can come into play for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because nuclear isn't green energy.
Yeah.
It's not green at all. Not at all.
Doesn't sound
Even
green either.
just no, well, and even just the erection of the nuclear facilities,
Mm.
the carbon footprint of those, the carbon footprint of uranium mining, the carbon
Oh
footprint
yeah.
of transporting the uranium, when you calculate all that in, nobody makes money.
Yeah.
They're getting subsidized left, right, and center from governments.
It's
So we're seeing our
crazy.
tax money supporting an industry that kills.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, we'll
Oh, you
get
got
more.
me on my soapbox now.
No, I love it. That's like exactly what I think. I mean, your work is trying to talk about, and I think it's also important that we talk about it here as well. Um, I also wanted to ask, before we get into your reading from your work, what kind of challenges a writer might expect to face when writing a book of poetry, and what kind of challenges have you faced in writing these like books of poetry?
Well, for me, my biggest crisis is confidence, and getting my work out there. Submitting to journals and stuff, I detest that work.
Yeah.
I have a really bad relationship with it. I'm working really hard to fix it finally, after how many years have I been writing? 25 years, 30 years. So I'm doing better at it. But a whole manuscript, once I have it, I have no problem sending that out. No problem at all.
Mm.
So that's one of my, what was your question again?
Just
Just
like what
where
kind
it
of
took me.
challenges a
That's,
emerging writer might face.
yeah. Another one for me was, well, with this uranium, especially is after I'd finished like a second or third draft, I realized I'd been depressed and that I was in a mild depression for probably 2.5 years. And when I mentioned it to a friend of mine, I said, I think I've been depressed for the last year and a half, 2 years. She goes, no shit, Sherlock. Like, okay. Yeah, so that's something to watch out for too if you have a tendency to the blues or,
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't like it wasn't severe or anything, but it was definitely low level depression
Yeah.
from just learning all I learned so quickly,
Oh,
I
definitely.
think.
I'll take breaks sometimes from things that I'm working on if I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
the subject matter is getting a little dark. We might need a
Yeah.
little refreshing break.
Well, self-care became really important. Really, really important. And my meditation practice, I would not have been able to do it without my meditation practice. That is
Yeah.
for sure.
I hear stuff like that a lot is like really helpful, like for writers especially, just to get into a creative space, but also to like kind of like calm yourself and not always be going, getting things done and
Yeah,
yeah.
I just finished in April, uh, the Way of Writing class with Natalie Goldberg, who's been my one of my gurus. Writing down the bones is like my Bible, sort of for writing. So I took her class, and it was really good to reacquaint myself with that writing practice, the sitting and just writing steadily for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, pen on the page, always moving. That that really, really refreshed me this spring.
Yeah, I think we had a book in our poetry class that I kind of talked about a similar methodology. I believe it was Galesher. Yeah, that's the one. The one continuous mistake.
Mm,
Gail Sure, yes. It was
I have that, but haven't read it.
it's good. I think it helped me a lot with poetry because that last term we were kind of like I was kind of dipping my toes in a little bit more and a little nervous. What did you think about it, Callum?
I was reading it and then I got distracted and it made me want to read Dharma again. So I put one continuous mistake down and then I picked up teachings of Buddha and just like read the Dharma again instead of what I was supposed to be reading. So
That
Yeah,
too,
being a
though.
student is hard.
it is.
All right, though. Why don't we dive into some readings, and then we'll have more questions afterwards for you as well.
Sure.
Perfect.
This is all from the first section of the book, which is Hiroshima. And then towards the end, I read one or two from the last section of the book. This poem is called Prologue, and it begins with quotes from William Robertson and Louise Half. Prologue. Stuck in the middle of open space somewhere. William Robertson. I got bit. By what? Louise Half. She had anticipated the 10-hour flight, stuck between two men, husband and son, would be difficult. But in the open space of sky, she had no panic attack or emotional challenges. The anticipation of seeing her daughter, the world traveler, a dreamer and doer, must have helped. She hadn't anticipated the bite, how desperately she'd fall for Japan, nor that the trip would spark new work and a string of fortuitous coincidences. Before she'd left Kyoto, she anticipated a return for the cherry blossom festivals the following year, and said as much to her expat hosts as she leaned on her rolling black backpack and chatted on the small patio at the front entrance to the maquia. She hadn't anticipated where the trip would take her work, from Japan and World War II to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster exclusion zone, to 3 Mile Island, to a once thriving northern Saskatchewan community built up around uranium. She had anticipated examining some uranium hotspots, the nuclear industry's ongoing impact on the environment and its inhabitants, as well as revisiting her organizing work in the peace movement before Women in Black, before Iraq, before Kosovo, before Iraq. She hadn't anticipated finding evidence of Saskatchewan uranium around the world. An activist's apologia. Somehow, the prairie girl fell into dazed trust, believing her communities would help meet her needs, into accepting that any choice for any action matters, and the walk accomplishes more than the talk. So many years, the personal is political, evolved within. Woundings healed in the safety of circles. She learned to see big pictures, collective injustices, and to give her voice and skills to building a movement, multi-pronged, to protect people and the planet, while she raised 2 babies to adulthood and nurtured communities until the act of committing words to paper demanded more, and she also learned to trust the dance of ink on a salted page. About that little boy. Standing at the granite dedication stone, my 20-something son glanced over his right shoulder to where I stood, trembling, about to burst. My breath unsteady, gaspy, tears lining my cheeks. You okay, Mum? He knows me well. Moments earlier, our family of 4 had stepped off a Hiroshima City Transit bus and onto a treed street. Sun hat on head, camera at hand, the perfect tourist. I prepared to shoot. Then Ganbaku, the UNESCO World Heritage Site. A-bomb dome loomed. Designed by Czech architect Jan Letzel and completed in 1915, the Hiroshima Prefectural Commercial Exhibition, its bony remains, still stood after U.S. forces, in collusion with Canada and Great Britain, dropped Little Boy, the first atomic bomb used directly on a human population, on August 6, 1945. 500 feet from its epicenter, the skeletal arches reveal the design's key features. Beneath and around the dome, concrete rubble. A black wrought iron fence surrounds, preserved. Japan had already issued a conditional surrender to Allied forces, I later learned. Diplomacy had been working. So why drop an untested nuclear bomb and kill 66,000 people immediately, 70% civilians, collateral damage, and the other 69,000 injured, additional 60,000 dead by the year's end, and how many more from radiation-related illness and disease, from shock, depression, birth defects? What of the intergenerational sickness and trauma? The orphans and forgotten? And what else? Just give me a minute, okay? I said as bones registered meaning. Rooted, imagination, history, and emotion swirled me back in time. But before I'd completely landed on that bright morning in 1945, my son's voice returned me to the present, into my body, into the moment. Instead of falling to the ground to wail in response to the horrific scene I'd glimpsed, I dropped into a breathing exercise. A gift to the self, a teacher may have once explained. Breathe in, out, focus, nostril, lung, mouth, in and out, presence, a little more deeply each inhalation, making space, all the years of practice building to this moment. Emotion set aside for now, time for expression later. Remember now, notice now, son, daughter, husband, family vacation, Japan, Golden Week, hundreds of tourists, a rumble in my gut, recognition, knowingness, a release in my chest, a deep breath. I focused on the building's frame, the cindercrete debris, plant growth, my index finger clicking the shutter. Back and forth, up and down, above and around, finding multiple angles to capture the ruins in the frame, and yearning for a telephoto lens to plunge me more thoroughly into that darkness, into the guts of the wreckage, until my family had moved far beyond the skeletal building. This place, a memorial, a memory, a remembering, or ground zero for the insidious degradation of the planet, its peoples and creatures. Hiroshima crows. A murder of crows. Separate, swoop, soar, settle. Drop silent white bombs. Hiroshima crow flies solo, tree to roof, sings melancholic quah. The cacophony. Crows cause echo off buildings, fly into windows. A life, my street, our story. How inherited privilege sent us to daughter living a dream in Asia. How our family vacation altered my molecules. A statue wept in Hiroshima. Before us, a World Heritage Site, the bones of a building, bared, preserved, and still standing more than 70 years after Little Boy halted all traffic on the streets and a pileup of the dead ensued. Back home, restlessness. The Peace Memorial Museum artifacts, a child's trike, perhaps once red and white, now scorched metal and rubber melded. A small garment found on a street, its sleeve burnt out, raising questions about arms. The shadow of a body on concrete, the remains and the grave. How the story of my country changed. How the story of Canadian uranium must be told. And when I am old, I will write poems, giving gratitude to Earth, its capacity to survive mining, overproduction, and uber development by those who hold that keep up with the Joneses mentality that's killing us. I will write I will write poems for all that is, those nervous nuthatches fluttering from the boughs of spruce to me, eager bills pecking peanuts from my outstretched hand. I will write for the embrace of a sky wide and heavy with promise, turning from blue-gray to azure, already running streams to rivers and sloughs. For the communities that transformed this maiden into mother, and now this wrinkled, emancipated crone. Exploring compassion piece. Love's firmest ground lies beneath the fragile, within the vulnerable. And that's a quote from a Carolyn McDade song, Compassion Piece. Never before has a song taken its place in my body, nor my body taken its place in a song. Never noticed how it dances through my chakras, a charge from root through crown, a passion for love so deep I cannot stop grief. So sink in, face fears and feelings, knowing my bones, tissues, and emotions as cells alive in me, singing the long story of earth. Her tears and mine flow rivers as words and melody entwine to engage us in conversation with the song, embracing possibility, shadow, meaning, until defiance and hope rise up and I am ready, oh, so ready, to come and let me go with you. Thank you.
I wish we were all in the same room so I could do a round of
That's
applause.
very good.
Beautiful poetry. I mean, it was beautiful when I read some of it on the page as well, but also hearing it, it's wonderful. Um, I particularly really loved the a life, my street, our story, and that image of the bike is so powerful. Um, And I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier too, about how like activism through creative arts can be like so much more powerful in some ways. Um, but Callum, would you like to start us off with any questions or things that you would like
I
to say?
I would love to. First, thank you so much for reading this work. It's very stirring and moving and powerful, and it's good work. It's
Thank you.
it should be done. My first question is I was looking at like the form and structure of some of your poems, especially the change from the like prose poem structure to a more standard structure from the first two pieces. And I was wondering, what is there like a formula that you use? Is there like how do you pick structure and form for your work?
I don't pick, the work picks.
Mm.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds really corny, but when I'm working on a piece, I tend to know if it's going to be a prose piece or if it's going to be a poem. If it's not working, I'll sometimes try it as prose and see if it works then. Or if it's not working as prose, I'll do it as poetry. But I think what really got me thinking about it a lot was a class I took with Nicole Bright uh, last winter, not this past winter, the winter before, which was on short forms, prose poem, and essays as well. So I've really tried playing with the creative nonfiction and the poetry so that they kind of move into one another and out of one another without too much shock, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, and it doesn't sound corny at all. A lot of the time, the work does seem to make choices for you in poetry. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Two, I as a poet who likes writing in haiku, it gives me the slip from time to time, though. Um, did you find any difficulties in like writing haikus in English or
Not
just
at
writing
all.
haikus in
I
general?
love writing haiku. I was not feeling well the second time I visited Hiroshima, and I mostly stayed in my room for the first 4 days. My daughter was there, thankfully, to take care of me. I must have picked something up on the plane. Anyway, um, I listened to the crows out my window, and the poems came. They came. They've had some fine tuning, but I will often just, write a Facebook status in haiku.
That's awesome.
I love it.
It's
Yeah,
fun. I like numbers. I like patterns. Yeah.
yeah, and I
So
It's
think
quite sorry, I was gonna say it's quite thematic too, with the like Japanese history in some ways. With yeah.
yeah,
mhm,
it works. I think the haiku is a very good poem for when you need to be still. Like it's a good
mm,
exercise in stillness.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, Third, like because of the like your work is very imagistic, especially the prose poems. It made me think about photography and if one like is photography a hobby or an interest of yours?
Well, I took about 400 photographs in Japan. So then I took a workshop with Brenda Schmidt that was offered at St. Peter's. If just was it
Mm.
the year after or just after we got back from Hiroshima? And she did a fantastic workshop that got me working with my photos to write some of these poems. Yeah.
Ah,
Wonderful, perfect. So you can kind of speak on say the influence of photography on writing and perhaps vice versa.
I don't know about that, but it can certainly help me with details, with scenery, with, if I look at a photograph long enough, I'll get a stronger sense of what was going through me when I took it, if I remember taking it. And I didn't write down everything. Uh, I don't log my photos. I'd be 25 photos of this rock under the, yeah, I, um, I'm just an amateur photographer. I love it, but I'm an amateur.
I really liked how photography kind of played into the poems. Like when you, which one was it? In the about that little boy as well as prologue, I believe. Like you mentioned, taking photos in the
Mm,
poems themselves, and that was really cool. I believe one of them too. It said I was about to shoot. I think was
mhm,
the language, and I just thought that that was so. Oh yes, about that little boy, I prepared to shoot, which I thought was really powerful given the nature of the poem and just like the almost like sense of like an impending disaster in that moment as well, and that's really
oh,
cool.
thank you.
Um, Yeah, so I have a couple of questions of my own as well. So coming back to activism and writing, would you like to speak a little bit more on the importance of writing to activism and how it kind of can change? Because I know your other books
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
been
Yeah.
a, yeah, my first creative writing class was with Dave Margosius, and I love Dave to bits. But one of the first things he said to me was, Bernie, have you ever heard of subtle? Because I was very preachy. I came from activism to writing, not from writing to activism. So I had to really learn a lot about how to write and be political with my work and to not preach and to allow the images and the scene to tell what I wanted to say or for it to even be interpreted in different ways. I had to work really hard on that. And this manuscript, I think, is probably the best I've done with that of my books so far. I hope.
Yeah, it seems
It will be by
pretty
the time
awesome.
I'm done with it.
I'm so looking forward to the completed manuscript as well after getting a bit of a taste, and I'm sure
So am
our
I.
listeners will as well. Yeah, it would probably also feel good for you to just be like, all right, done and shelved.
Yeah, yeah, I got another project going. Let me go.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
okay. It pays it pays to spend a bit of time with the work to make sure it's the best it can be.
hmm I think as we work on our thesis projects as like the master's students of the program, I think that's what we're just starting to do that this spring summer as the bulk of our writing period, and I think we're starting to realize just how long these projects take, and also that we're only just now writing first drafts, so getting to like
Hmm.
those later drafts, like yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, that's where the support of others comes in. Like
Mm-hmm.
Sage Hill helped me a lot refining my work. The manuscript evaluation service offered by the Saskatchewan Writers Guild, that's been fantastic. Barbara Clark has looked at my manuscript twice now, and that's been absolutely important. Writer in residence, Jill Robinson, had a look
Yeah.
at it as well. So I've sent it out to a few first readers, but I don't send it out to many writers. I want to get the impression of people for this manuscript of
Mhm.
activists to see what they think. So that's my next stage now is to work their feedback into the manuscript
That's
and get to
awesome.
Chernobyl and Uranium City.
Yeah, to do even a little bit more. Yeah, that's really cool too to think of like what different kinds of like beta readers can do for your work as well, and like where you want your like who is your audience in a way as well. So very cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it's something to think about even in the preparing of your manuscript. Um, about where it's going to go. I had the wonderful surprise of meeting a physician who's involved with nuclear disarmament when I was at a festival in Sudbury a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he gave me his business card, said, when you're contact me when your book is out and we'll have you come to one of our events.
oh,
It's like, cool,
fantastic!
right? Yeah,
That's
like
so cool.
who who knew? Yeah, so those things just kind of happen. I love it.
I'm definitely missing right now just being in this like online format, like talking to people in person and just kind of like making weird connections like like that. Exactly. So looking forward to when we can do that again. And um, Cal, do you have any other things that you would like to bring up as well?
Um, Not
Just kind of hanging in there thinking.
I'm just so happy to be here, man.
Aw.
This is just a very lovely thing that I'm involved in, and I'm very proud to be involved in it. Um, no, I think you have some more questions though, Delane.
I do, yeah. I just wanted to let some space if you had any as well. But another thing I was thinking of was there seems to be this like recurring motif in the poetry you read for us today, about like family, children, with the name of the bomb being a little boy, sons and daughters. And I was wondering what role family plays in your poetry, particularly in this collection, this book.
Well, I mostly use them as a jumping off point. Certainly for the first section, that trip visiting Kate in Japan. But then again, I'm just thinking when I go to the Iraq section, I open with a poem which is diary from my journals when Bush went into Iraq. So, and my daughter was an infant then. Or,
Ah.
so it was, or was that first? I can't remember the years. I'm sorry.
Oh no, no
Um,
worries.
she was born in 91 anyway, so it was around that time. I remember, yeah, I wrote in my diary a lot because I questioned bringing a child into a world that was like this.
Hmm.
So I've refined that, and that's the piece that opens that section. Um, but I mean, kids are our future. I love kids. I love my kids. They become wonderful young adults, and their friends are wonderful. And there's so many people bashing millennials, and I just want to say, you gotta get to know some new millennials then, honey, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of pretty fine ones around out here. Anyway, I'm veering off topic. My family is absolutely important to me in everything I do. And they, yeah, they've only, my kids have only known me as a writer and a bit of a teacher, so they don't think much of, oh, mom's doing an interview or mom's giving a reading. It's just what I do. Um, but I'm careful too what I write about them because I don't want to alienate my kids. So yeah.
But yeah, I think it's super. It's such an interesting way to kind of add like a personal touch to the poetry, and also a collection on these like disasters, which have affected so many families as well. And I just think it's so like I really liked that inclusion of the family and your own family, and like how it gives it that, yeah, like just really personal story interwoven in as
Well, and
well.
it gives a reader something to hold on to, right?
Hmm.
Something they can latch into, and they want to know more then about the family, about the experience, about whatever. It's interesting that you ask about family because my new manuscript I'm working on is a family history about
Ah.
my ancestors coming to Canada at the turn of the 19th century, or the turn of the 20th century, I'm sorry. Um, but also going back further than that because my cousin has done research into our family history. So I've got back to 1784.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and their move from southern Germany to Bukovina. So
Ah,
it's I'm really excited about it, but I
that's
have to finish
awesome.
this other one too. So it's nice
Got
to
a
have two
lot of things
projects.
getting
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah,
So two things to look out for in the future.
yeah. Hopefully more.
Fantastic. Yes, and more of course. But two things in the near-ish future.
One hopes.
Yeah.
One never knows what publishers will say.
Ah, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, I was also so your other two books as well. Is it alright if I bring those up into the conversation too?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So I was just taking a look like on your website. So this hot place was your first book, which examines place, heart, and politics, and the socio-placement of women in the land and their quest for spiritual grace and worth. And then you also have Dry Valley, which encapsulates one woman's relationship with herself, her alcoholic spouse, and the world in three different Saskatchewan landscapes, which offer a fascinating interplay between mindful explorations of self and immersions in the challenging complexities of interpersonal relationships, social issues, and meaningful engagement with the environment. So one thing I was thinking of in reflection to your other two books, and also as well as how it kind of comes into some of the poems that you've read today, as well as just how like Saskatchewan and like a sense of home comes into your work. I guess as someone from Saskatchewan too, I just like think about it a lot.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this hot place was rejected by Ontario publisher because it was too
Oh
Saskatchewan,
no!
right?
Oh come on!
Yeah, yeah. That was like 2008-ish, something
Hmm.
like that. So hopefully they've changed their tune, but
Yeah, I mean people
yeah, I
live
don't know.
here. We write stuff.
Right, and we're good writers. That's it.
Exactly.
We're good writers too. There's that bias still towards the prairies, I think.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't even know they have that bias. They read what's around them and the people around them, and they don't see a lot of Saskatchewan people around them
Hmm.
until they come here or meet some at Sage Hill or at one of the retreats or at a conference or something, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Like
Sorry.
I'm writing a memorial piece right now for the late Mick Burrs, who lived in
Ah,
Saskatchewan for a really long time
mhm.
and had an impact on writers like me and others like Alison Lohans, Brenda Niskola, Steve Wolfson, a filmmaker, and he was hardly known across the country.
So weird. Like,
I know. He was a Saskatchewan Book Award for Poetry winner,
mhm. But
and
it's
yeah.
almost like asking Americans about Canadian music. But
So we're
yeah,
all
it's.
Mm.
so American.
Yeah, but I shouldn't complain. I'm lucky to have two books out there. I edited a book. I did two books, so
Yeah,
yeah, it's good.
that's awesome. And you have so much experience in like like I guess like multidisciplinary areas. So you've been an editor, an author, a teacher. You've worked on like fiction and poetry, like editing. And what has that experience been like for you?
The editing, I love editing. I love editing. I didn't realize how much until recently. I edited Windscript and I
Oh yeah.
edited Spring, and I've edited now. I've done some manuscript evaluations as well, and I'm doing contract work as an editor as well. I've just finished a beautiful one for the Provincial Association of Transition Houses. They've put
Oh.
together a training manual for Indigenous women who have experienced trauma in their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
it is one powerful, powerful, powerful manual. I learned so much.
That's
That's the thing
awesome.
about editing. You learn so much. I love
Yeah,
it. And you get to help people. You get to help people tell their stories. It's great.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Like, and the Writers Guild does a lot of that kind of stuff. I know we were talking about it a bit earlier as well. That's the Saskatchewan Writers Guild for anyone that's watching out of Saskatchewan as well. Um, I recently joined them, and it's just crazy how actually we have like such a vibrant writing community in Saskatchewan, um, which I think surprises a lot of people who come here for like the U of S. Like I know a couple people who in our group if they when they come here for the U of S program and they suddenly realize like, whoa, there's a ton of writers here and it's like vibrant and like there's stuff
Yeah.
going on like.
Yeah. Well, we can thank the Arts Board for that. Tommy
Mm.
Douglas set that up in 1948.
Well,
So
thank
it's
you.
been,
Totally.
yeah, it's been a lifeline for us, I think, keeping us writing, keeping our culture growing and thriving, our book publishing industry going, and our arts and culture,
Mhm.
building it and keeping it going.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. All right, well, Callum, do you have any other questions before we jump into the rapid fire question period?
um, no, but we do have the rapid fire questions, which is usually when I'm on the show. That's my jurisdiction.
All right,
Oh,
Jump into that if you'd like.
I will
Um,
hand it
how
over
much?
to you.
Do I have a time limit?
No, no, it's not. It's not. We're not gonna literally like light a fire under you. But
I don't know why we call them rapid fire questions because they're usually making up the bulk of our program. First question though, what time of day do you write?
I like writing in the morning. First thing, I get up around 5 and I'm often writing by 6, sometimes right away as soon as I get up. And since the pandemic, I've been meeting with a group of writers twice a week at 8:15 in the morning, and that has been wonderful. It's an international group, US and Canada. And another group, since I've taken the Natalie Goldberg class, meeting at 7:30 on Monday mornings. So I'm going. By 10 o'clock, I'm ready to have a rest.
I feel like that's opposite of you, Callum.
I used to be, but I used to be a nighttime writer. It was when I had kids that I had to learn how to write at a different time of day because by the time 8 o'clock came around, there was no way I had energy for writing.
Oh
So I
yeah.
learned to write at 4 in the morning, 5 in the
I
morning.
have heard that before. That's how Marina Endicott does it, and she did mention that having kids changed her timetable. Yeah. 2, what is your daily writing goal if you have any?
To write.
Love it.
Same here.
To write. Yeah. Get my butt in the chair and write, or pick up a pen and just to write. If I pressure myself too much, I'm awful. I don't do anything.
I feel the same, totally.
Usually. Number 3, what does your writing space look like? What is it? Could you describe
A
it?
disaster zone? No, I shouldn't say that because it's messy. My desk is messy, but I also write at the kitchen table because I also do all the cooking for our household and I cook from scratch and so I can sit at the kitchen table and do some work there. I set up my tablet and my notebook and if the dinger goes on the stove, I can get up and go. I mean, it makes for a bit of not smooth writing, but I can at least get some things done while I'm there.
I feel like kitchen table has been like relatively common. Like I think office, like having like a little desk and study space is probably most common, but we've heard kitchen table a couple times.
Yeah.
That's all I've got. Kitchen table right now. When did you first start taking writing seriously?
Taking it seriously. Well, I think when I took a first class, I probably was the first, and that was just after the birth of my daughter, so probably 92. And then I took the class again after the birth of my son, so that'd be 94, 95 maybe. And then I took a correspondence class with Liz Phillips. I think that was 95. And then when I went to Sage Hill in 96, after that, it was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to get a book done. Took me a long time, part-time writing it, but I did it. Yeah.
I feel like with this question too, like, I feel like when you're a writer, it's like you've just like at some point you started doing writing. And it's like, it's hard to decide like when the like taking it seriously is, I suppose. Like, so.
Well, I think publication for me was, I mean, publication in the Western Producer when I was a kid, that was one thing, but publication in a literary magazine, like my first publication in Grain, that was huge, huge.
Oh, yeah.
Publication in, what were the first ones? CV2.
Oh, yeah.
And there was another one out of Alberta. Oh, I can't remember the name of the magazine. Prairie Fire, maybe?
Oh, is that the, yeah.
Prairie Fire? No, there's another the Prairie Journal. I can't remember. Anyway, that was a long time ago.
I'm currently sending
95.
out to those places.
Oh,
so
good.
I'm like, fingers crossed, like hearing rejections and then sending more.
Yeah, good for you. Get that practice solidified. I highly recommend that. Highly recommend that. Don't be attached to outcome.
Oh, yeah.
Just send them out.
That is the hard
Keep
part.
I know, right? Yeah.
Build some calluses.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure.
Question 5. What's the first book you remember getting really into?
Getting really into? Well, one from my youth that really sticks with me is a Stephen King novel, Salem's Lot. So scary. I slept with the light on for 2 weeks. I was
Oh
15 years
no.
old sleeping with the light on.
I still
I
like
think I got into it.
Oh yeah. Some of his books I'm like, it's not too scary. And then some of them like some of them just like get at that really specific fear you didn't know you had, and then you're like, oh man, I
Yeah.
need a nightlight.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 24 and I still sometimes will be like, okay, I'm gonna turn on a lamp in my bedroom before I go to bed.
They don't Stephen King books, they don't really scare me because I'm, like a white male writerly type, and they always seem to end up in the big
Ah.
books. So if it ever happens to me, I'll be fine. But Salem's Lot, yeah, that's a good one. I really like that book. Number 6, do you need an outline when you write, or do you write by the seat of your pants?
I think I don't think I ever write by the seat of my pants. I think I have an idea that I go with, and for poetry, I never use an outline ever. But for prose, I will use an outline, especially if it's a contracted piece. Then I need to be very careful and do it well, and in a more formal kind of essay. But typically, I will write a first draft freehand and then maybe write another section of it freehand before I take it to computer. And then once it's on computer, I'll work with it from there.
That's exciting to know that you also like I also always write the poems by hand first. Like and then put it onto the computer in almost like an editing process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. My second draft happens, or maybe it could be third draft by then, on the computer when it goes on the computer.
Very interesting.
But yeah, I'm firmly believe in writing that first draft of anything by hand. It engages a different part of me. I think I'm more connected with my heart self when I write by hand than when I'm on the computer. I'm more disengaged, I think, from my emotion on the computer. And with poetry, I don't want to do that. I want the emotion to come through. Oh, I mean, I want to craft it so that it comes through the way I want it to, or the way it needs to be, or the way it's calling to be presented.
I feel like that's why I'm glad I learned to write cursive. I know like it's kind of it's a lose or a lost art kind of at this point, I guess. They don't want to teach it anymore. But...
It was interesting in that Natalie Goldberg class. Like I had been a firm user of the Papermate blue fine point pens. Well, she recommended getting a rollerball pivot pen, Pivot 7. I love it. It goes so much faster than the ink pen. I can get a lot more done. Yeah.
Good to know.
It is.
I have like a fountain pen, like the Lamy, which
nice.
I'll now refuse to like write in anything other than like I like the paper in the like it's a German name. It's like Leuchter. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, it's like, but these like book that
the moleskins.
Yeah, like moleskin or like anything of that sort. Just because like the paper runs smoother, and
interesting.
Writing, it's like I'll get stopped on regular paper. But I digress.
No, I think it's an important thing for writers to talk about pens and paper, actually.
I feel like we all love
their livelihood.
Like notebooks and paper. Exactly.
Number 7, what are you reading right now?
Right now, I am reading the books of Mick Burrs, aka Stephen Michael Brzezinski, and the one on top of the stack right now is Variations on the Birth of Jacob. Oops, sorry, I don't have my screen mirrored. It was the book that that won him the Poetry Award. And one of the stories I'm telling in the essay is about my friend Linda, who is the mother of Jacob.
Ah.
Yeah.
So excellent.
It's a small world, I tell you.
It really is.
Yeah. So I'm reading that. I wish I had more of his chapbooks. He founded Waking Image Press in like the 70s, and he was still publishing when he left Saskatchewan in like 2011, I think it
Oh,
was.
wow.
And he carried on publishing when he was in Toronto, I know. So yeah, prolific Saskatchewan author and a
No
fine, fine
kidding.
poet. And
Excellent.
a practitioner of meditation, I believe.
Ah, it all comes full circle in these conversations.
It's the poets, man. They always seem to be into that stuff.
We all
Well, it
meditate.
certainly helps with the focus, I tell
Oh,
you.
yeah.
The breath work.
Absolutely, breath work. What is a book on writing that you'd recommend?
Breathing the Page by Betsy Warland.
Perfect.
Of course.
Especially for people who've already written a bit.
Mm.
It might be a bit daunting for someone who's new to writing. For them, I'd recommend Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, or Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, or even Stephen King's book on writing. Have you read that?
Yeah.
It's really good. I was surprised.
Yeah.
But Betsy for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, and Mary Oliver's Handbook on Poetry is really good too.
Ooh.
I have a list on my on a blog I was doing when I was writer in residence. I got people on Facebook to tell me their favorite books on writing,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I compiled this list and gave it to my students. I was teaching classes out there, so it's still out there somewhere on the web, and I should add to it because there's a lot more been published since.
I'm just adding them all to my wish list right now. Googling as we speak.
I can send you the link to the document.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can add it. It'll be in the description of the YouTube video as well for anyone
okay.
interested. We'll put it there, along with Bernadette's website as well. I think do we have one or two more quick fire?
Two more very rapid fire questions, as you can tell. What's one piece of fiction you always return to?
Fiction?
I think poetry as well.
Yeah.
Poetry?
Poetry.
Yeah, if you want to switch that question to poetry, then I could talk about it.
Yeah.
What's one?
And one, I can't just one. I can't just want anything about poetry. But I love going to like Jan's Wiki. I'm going to stick to Canadian. Don Mackay, Tim Lilburn. Locally, I love Tracy Hammond's work. I love Judith Krause's work. I really love Judith Krause's work. And oh, there's a lot. I mean, I don't turn to just one ever. I have quite a vast collection of poetry. My kids tell me I'm a book hoarder. Like well, that's the you see in the background, that's the can lit, and that's just the fiction.
Just the can lit fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
That's good.
I'm glad I recognized all of those poets that you mentioned too. I'm like some of the first couple awesome. Like Canadian classics for sure.
And well, Lorna Crozier too, because she was just becoming quite famous as a poet in Canada when I was learning to be a poet. And I remember hearing her on CBC radio on Morningside with Peter Zosky, and she was introduced as a poet from Saskatchewan. And I just like,
I know,
a poet from Saskatchewan on national radio. I'd never heard of such a thing. Yeah. Though I had heard of Lorna by that point. But yeah, that was...
Yeah, I have like a collection or two of her, like over on one of my bookshelves over there. I'm like, yeah, I'm such a fan.
Yeah,
And that is the like, especially like it's so cool when some of those are like, yeah, like Saskatchewan poets. I feel like we have especially a strong poetic community.
We do. I think we do. Yeah, yeah. Well, and people want to come here to teach us as well, like Sage Hill. Everyone I know wants to know. When I was on the board of Sage Hill, everyone wanted to know, how do I get to teach there? How do I get to teach there?
Oh, that's awesome. That's so good to
Yeah,
hear too.
yeah. Well, and I think the School of the Arts kind of set that precedence. I
Hmm.
don't know that other provinces had the School of the Arts in the 70s and
Oh,
80s. And that was really instrumental for a lot of writers here in Saskatchewan, and it brought a lot of writers to the province as well.
yeah. No, that's fantastic. I'm like, it's kind of almost like surreal to me because I'm like, I lived here like all my life in Saskatchewan, so I'm like, the fact that we have such a thriving community is just so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very wonderful. I noticed, I don't know, I haven't really done it scientifically, but I've noticed that since we've moved Wheat and Laurel's base of operations to Saskatchewan, we've gotten a lot more traction with people attending our workshops
Mm,
and like
Ah,
getting involved. I don't know if that's just because like we've been working for so long and we're finally making headway, or if it actually was the move. But it's very nice to be in this community of people who are passionate about art and
mm-hmm,
literature and writing.
mm-hmm. Well, Saskatoon has a great community up there too.
yeah.
Love it.
But we do
Last,
in the whole province.
Oh
The
yeah,
yeah,
whole province, yeah.
yeah. I'm
okay.
like,
Last question.
oh yeah. Last question.
Oh, one more. Okay.
One more. What is something about writing that has been on your mind lately?
Well, what has been on my mind lately is teaching writing, actually. I am setting up some online courses. I'm teaching one coming up, which I've taught before online, so it's no big deal, but I'm adding it to my website. If you play around on my website, you'll find the training camp doesn't really go anywhere. So that's the piece that I'm thinking about now is how to build that up and how I'm going to do it and how I'm starting in the fall.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And then after that, I'm also thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this manuscript?
Of course. Yeah.
When am I going to get to Chernobyl? And
Yeah.
then for my other manuscript, I want to get to Europe as well. So if I can
Oh,
combine those two trips now, I think I will.
yeah.
Maybe spend a month in Europe.
Well, those vaccines, you'll get your second dose soon, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we'll be good to
Yeah.
go. Okay, but again, do we have any last like comments anyone wants to get out before we good?
Well,
Yeah.
I wanted to know when this is going to be. Oh no, shouldn't be in the recording. Sorry.
No, no worries. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bernadette, for coming on to our show. A bunch of links will be down in our description for anyone interested in checking Bernadette out and Bernadette's other works. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show and to talk poetry for the first time on the podcast because we've been mostly doing fiction and novels, and poetry is just so exciting and very
Yay.
I guess we've been talking about it a lot in our classes recently as well. So very awesome to talk to a poet themselves too. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much, and bye bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.